So I was going to start with asking for your outlook on streaming and entertainment in general. I mean, Netflix released its Q3 earnings last week, and it's safe to say they were extremely positive. And off the back of that, the Wall Street Journal described Netflix as the most investable name in a troubled media market. So, you know, things are looking good for Netflix, but the market is undoubtedly troubled. So my question is, how do you see the future of streaming in this troubled market? What might it look like in 5 years from now?
So I think the entertainment landscape is not troubled.
Right.
I think the way that people consume it has become disintermediated, it's been disaggregated. I think people are doing it in a bunch of different ways, and they're favoring things that favor the consumer, which I think does play into our strength as a company. Early on and from the beginning of time, we've always moved into kind of consumer-first approach to doing business. So when people, I always think around the roots of watching entertainment at home, television, of course, very limited selection, you know, for many, many years, just 3, then eventually 4 networks to choose from, and they barely competed with each other for eyeballs and attention, with basically the same things to watch. Home video comes along, super inconvenient. You had to get in the car and drive each way to the video store to get your movie, and the movie you wanted is out of stock, so you get the second choice or the third choice. And so we were trying to solve for a lot of problems with a vision that actually Reed Hastings told me in 1999, was that eventually all home entertainment is going to come into the home on the internet. And I said that, by the way, at that time, no entertainment came into the home on the internet. And it was a huge, big vision. It could have been perceived as a crazy one. But what we saw was the power of the internet for convenience, for choice, for control, all things that were very human appealing were going to benefit entertainment greatly. And that was always the vision for the business, was to be a digital entertainment business, a global digital entertainment business with lots of choice and lots of selection, lots of freedom, all the things that we offered. And entertainment, I think, as other companies have tried to migrate into what we do, they still have their roots in old legacy media models they're trying to support. Linear television that is not at your control, that is not at your timetable. The very specifically narrow choices of things to watch, where we kind of, you know, can be very broad and have a big variety and quality of programming at a remarkably low price and in a UI that you can find the things you love. So I don't think entertainment is in trouble, and I think that consumers are speaking loud and clear that they prefer streaming.
Yeah. So obviously you had these great results, but 2 years ago things weren't looking quite so good for Netflix. There were some questions around profitability and your ability to keep growing. What did that moment feel like for you in the company?
So for me, I'm coming up on 25 years at Netflix, so the things that are happening are never as bad as they seem, and nor are they ever as good as they seem. So we keep a pretty level head about ourselves, and we knew that the business fundamentals were sound. COVID kind of threw the rhythms off a little bit, but that the business fundamentals were sound, and we kept betting on, you know, the core business and the core business fundamentals. So it felt a bit lousy, and we had an enormous drop in the market cap of the business. But again, we were looking at it thinking, well, there's nothing that's happening in our business that would reflect that. So let's just stay the course. Let's just stay the course.
So one thing you're not having to worry about at the moment, which you were having to worry about before, was the writers' strike. And I wonder, what did you learn from that writers' strike? I mean, am I right in thinking that obviously a lot less content was created at the time, and that remains the case today, but yet your customers are still sticking around. So what did you learn from that pause in production?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of programming, which is, again, because we're trying to make something for everyone. One way that gets interpreted is, well, it's a lot of stuff. And it is a lot of programming. So relative to other people, we had a lot of things in the pipeline to keep things going. But it definitely had an interruption in our output this year. So there's kind of a delayed impact on it because the things that were in production were stalled. Our film slate was stalled. And some of our biggest returning shows got pushed out into those back parts of the year. We were talking about Nobody Wants This. That show was supposed to come out earlier in the first part of the year. It came out in the very back half. Managed to get Bridgerton in there. It was about the only big one that we'd planned for the beginning of the year, and everything else got pushed out. But people found, you know, things to watch. But I don't take any comfort from that. Yeah. I do think there's really, it's very important that all the studios and labor, all the constituents, they have to speak all the time. We have to have healthy working relationships together. So we hope that we'll never see something like that happen again. But I think it's really important that we talk on an ongoing basis, not just when the contracts come up. So.
Did you end up making more stuff overseas? I mean, have you hedged your bets by moving more production across?
Well, we have. Remember, more than half of our business is overseas. So we make a lot of we produce original content in 50 countries. And those shows are not only incredibly relevant, in fact, the mandate of those is that they're incredibly relevant in the country they're made for. And if they happen to travel, that's a windfall. And sometimes, like a Squid Game, it's a huge windfall in that the whole world fell in love with that show. And it was probably the only thing, Wednesday and Squid Game are the two most global shows we've ever had, where as many people in India watched it as people watched it in Indiana, and they just really loved this show in a really global way. But neither of them was engineered to be global in any way.
It's so sort of wonderful.
We did do a lot of international production.
But there's still this element of surprise that can, even in spite of all the algorithms and the sort of close attention you pay to data, sometimes something will catch you catch you like that. I mean, apart from Squid Game, have there been any other shows that have come out of the blue and sort of surprised you?
I mean, just to follow what you said, I think that the Squid Game is a fun example because there's something incredibly human about having a hard time predicting something bigger than you've ever seen before. So when I ask the teams to predict, how big will this be? Usually the biggest thing they could say will be it'll be as big as the last big thing we had. Nobody predicted Squid Game was going to be twice as big as anybody had ever seen before. And nobody had predicted, because no one was trying to make it a global show, that it would catch on the way it did. And our advantage of that was it had some very universal messages in it. It was because it was so specifically local. It was so uniquely and authentically Korean that people like that. They see something else in it, and it reminds them, I think, of how small the world is. So when you do it right, it's that thing. But I actually think that when people predict how big something might be, they are limited by how big they've ever seen. Yeah. So the idea of doing something that no one's ever seen before, or something bigger than anyone's ever seen before, is very hard for us all to pull off with all the data in the world. And sometimes it's the other way around. You think, oh my God, this is all the sum of the parts here is pretty great. And then people just didn't like how they came together, and it just didn't work. So it's still a very creative process.
Yeah, that's
the
showbiz.
data can't. Yeah.
So I've got to ask you about generative AI. Is Netflix using generative AI at the moment? And if so, how?
So I look at Gen AI as a tool for creators to create content, not for Netflix to create instead of creators. And I think if it's a tool that helps creators make better programming, which is our core focus every day, day in, day out. Can we make the show a little bit better? Can we make the movie a little bit better? Will people love this more if it has this, or this? That's really in the hands of creators, and we try to enable them. And with the Gen AI tools are exactly the same. So I feel like there are opportunities, if it passes the big test, which is, can this use of this tool make a better show? Then it will be really transformative and be helpful. But if it doesn't, I think it's going to be part of somewhere in the hype cycle of what it is right now.
Would Netflix ever consider buying a licensing deal with a Gen AI company to use in production?
Again, there's a series of tools that I think will be built on top of all that people will use, that will probably be helpful to help creators do better work. But I don't see us doing the work in that way. So it wouldn't be a great investment for us, because I think those tools will be widely available. So
you don't think it's going to materially change, the experience of watching Netflix, say 5 years from now, won't be or do you think it will be different?
Again, I don't. I think it would be very helpful in the UI, in choosing and all those kind of things. It'll have a profound impact on helping people find things and all those things. I think the internet will be moved by that Gen AI to help things that are already working work better. So I think that includes choosing and merchandising and UI creation.
So
and the idea is always trying to figure out, when you've got an enormous selection of things to pick from, it's really hard to pick, like, what do you want to watch? What do you want to watch tonight? Because that may be completely different than what you wanted to watch last night or yesterday. And so there's I think AI will be very helpful in helping people find things.
So you have a lot of cash on your balance sheet at the moment. Or would you consider any other types of acquisitions, studios, or are there things out there that you'd like to go shopping for?
So we've mostly been builders instead of buyers to get to this point. The few acquisitions we've done have mostly been in the kind of IP arena, things that we can produce from. I don't see us being out there. I think there's still so much room to grow here in the core business. Entertainment, professional films and television, games, and now advertising as well, that we've got a lot of room to grow in what we're doing. And we've been pretty good at building it. And every once in a while, tactically, we'll buy some things here and there. But for the most part, I wouldn't anticipate that to change dramatically.
So I want to ask you about all these different bits that you're trying out. But first of all, advertising, you mentioned it then. It's not a huge, I mean, you're sort of, it's not a huge part of the business yet, is it? But this new advertising tier, how important do you think that's going to be in the future for Netflix? It's, what kind of role will it play?
Yeah, look, at like any big business, new things have got to, have to do a lot to make a big dent or to be very impactful. So it will grow slowly over the next couple of years. We're happy to see how it's growing to date. The team has been doing a great job of kind of doubling our upfront commitments from year on year. We're really happy with the milestones we've hit so far. All that being said, we're building our ad teams from scratch, our sales teams from scratch. We're building new ad tech from scratch, and we're getting that all ramped up right now. And what's comforting is we have about 40 million users on the ad tier now, and growing pretty quickly. And I feel like the proven business model of video advertising and advertising on video content is out there, and that's all we have to do is be really good at all the things to get there. So, and I think at the core, it's right at our sweet spot, is engagement. We want the programming that people care about. People want to watch it. Advertisers want to be close to it. So I think if we do all those things well, we'll compete really well in that space. But I don't think it's something we're trying to prove a new theory here that people will watch advertising and video content. And I think for us, having an ad tier at all is just a way of opening up a larger total addressable market to folks who don't mind advertising and want a lower price. So I just think to us, it expands the total market.
So talking of lower price, it's interesting. When I told people I was going to be interviewing you, they asked two things. First of all, they say, ask him what to watch next, which we can get to. And then they say, and tell him not to put up the subscription price. So I'm just wondering how much higher can you go? How much more will the US consumer, or global consumer for that matter, tolerate when it comes to the subscription fee? Yeah,
I honestly think we've always had, it's a value equation. So the more time you spend watching Netflix, the more you value the things you watch on Netflix, that it's in direct correlation to how much you can charge for Netflix. And we have a very instant feedback model with consumers where one-click cancel. If you don't think it's valuable to you at that price point, you just click one button and you're off. So we are constantly in search of pleasing our members more and more and adding more and more value. And every once in a while, we come back to them and ask for an increase so that we can keep that cycle going. But I don't think we can do it unless we continue to add to the value.
Right.
So we've had a pretty good track record of doing that. We're growing our engagement. There's a published number of all the engagement, and you have to remember that when we started doing the password enforcement, we took fewer people on each account. So if you look at just the member households, that engagement is growing much faster than the total engagement, which is a good thing. That's the normalized for the password behavior. And that's a really good test, I think, because I think if people are watching and enjoying Netflix, they're happy to pay a little bit for it.
So you always talk very engagingly about engagement.
I know, it's
your key thing. It's absolutely key, but it's really interesting. What do you think? So you credit your success with this almost Maoist-like focus on engagement. What does an entertainment that doesn't focus on engagement look like? I mean, because not everybody is as focused as you are. What does it look like to not be purely focused on engagement?
Look, I think we were born direct to consumer. So all of our business was always going right to the consumer with an instant feedback model. So we've always been focused on that, are you happy? Are you happy with what we're providing you? A lot of other businesses, particularly in the entertainment space, are all kind of B2B businesses that don't really have to focus on real measurable enjoyment. Movie theaters, are the kind of go-between between the studio and the ticket buyers. Cable operators between the producers of content and the ultimate consumer. And all this is actually us making the content for the consumer and them telling us if they love it. And if they do love it, they stick around. And I have found that no better measurement of joy has been better than engagement, because I've never seen anybody turn off a show that they love, unless they just have to go to bed and they're going to watch more tomorrow. And I've never seen one stick around for a show that they hate. Now, I go to the movie theaters. I've seen a lot of movies that I don't like. I've never walked out. I've never physically walked out. I have. So I don't think you probably have. I haven't seen that many people walk out. I guess that maybe it happens sometimes. It becomes a meme if it does. But I do think in this model, streaming has kind of raised the bar on television and movies in a really remarkable way. Because when we release a new movie, we release a new TV show, it's now competing with everything ever made, ever. And you can, with one click of the button, no switching cost, you can just turn off this new thing and watch this other thing. So for me, it's like that's why we measure the engagement. That's why we look at how engaged people are from episode to episode. Do they finish the series that they started? Do they finish the movie that they push play on? All those things are the things that matter most to us, and that's why we're so hyper engaged in it. And again, I don't know what these other models might look like that charge and don't get engagement. I don't know how but it feels like a hack versus a business.
So talking of everything ever made ever, obviously the next generation are spending more time on YouTube, TikTok, as we all know. You know, are you I mean, they are going to be your future audiences.
Yeah. But
do you feel like you need to be playing in that space as well, getting to where they are, or are you just going to wait for them to mature and come to you?
Look, in some ways, it's going to be a training ground for storytellers and creators, which is great. In other ways, it's a way that people kill time. I do think killing time and spending time are two different activities. Yeah. And you can be careful not to get too distracted by chasing everything that people are doing. I think that a lot of what's happening on social media and through user-generated it's interesting and exciting. And I look at the monetization model. It isn't possible to do something at the scope and scale that we do on Netflix through that model. Just doesn't monetize well enough to do that. And the creators have to put up all their own money to do that. So I think the model itself is self-limiting in what the content can be. So we're in two different arenas in terms of programming in that way. But it is a way that people spend time on TV, so I do pay attention to it, of course.
Yeah. What about video games? Because you've also got into mobile video games, which is perhaps something that not all your subscribers are aware of. Are you expecting to make that part of your core growth?
Yeah, I look again back to what are people doing? What are they looking to for entertainment? And if you look at movies and television and advertising, supported content, and games, it's about a $600 billion consumer spend. And today we get about 5-6% of that. And engagement time on the TV of all those things, in the US we get about 10% of that. The rest of the world much smaller. So tons of room to grow in that. And games we were not really being part of it. So I think for me it's a little bit about how do people spend time and energy and entertainment time and energy playing games, and how can that actually complement what's happening on Netflix. So our most successful games to date, and it's a small thing, but it's growing, have been games based on our IP, like Too Hot to Handle and Love is Blind. And I think there's a world where you can build a gaming universe that's within the storytelling universe of a show, like Outer Banks, and that people will, in between seasons, will spend time in that world. And for super fans, you may even be able to spin up storylines and introduce new characters and all that. Through a game, so it becomes part of more interchangeable with how people are watching programming. It's a better version of interactive television than we've done before.
Right.
Yeah.
So I also want to ask you about sport. So traditionally, Netflix has done some great sports documentaries, Drive to Survive, the like, but you haven't really been into live sports streaming. However, Christmas Day, no less, you're going to be streaming 2 NFL games live, and you're also going to be streaming a boxing match between Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. So I suppose my question is, will we ever see a full season of college or professional football, baseball, basketball on Netflix?
I'll never say never, but I would say that right now we are in the live events business. Some of those events are sports. So the Tom Brady roast is as much a live event as the Tyson-Paul fight. So it's just a way that there's something very interesting and very exciting about when the world comes together to watch the same thing at the same time. They don't do it very often. That's what makes it so special. And I don't know that for us, so I think what's special about Christmas Day football is we have 2 games on Christmas Day. We're going to, I think, add a lot of value to the league in terms of making those games more international with our large footprint with 600 million users of Netflix around the world every day. We're going to do a lot to make it fun. It'll be aware that it's Christmas Day, so it's going to be super entertaining. It's going to be a kind of a fun event of presenting football. But I think if you did it every, 2 days a week and 3 days a week, it'd be a little less exciting. Now, along those lines, we do have WWE coming next year that will be live every week.
Yeah.
So we'll see. The most part for me, the difference between the event and the full season is really the economics.
Yeah.
And I think the leagues do a phenomenal job of building fandom. And for that, they get to keep all the money. And distribution's pretty low margin business in league sports, for full season league sports. I do think if we can add some value back to them, which I think we do uniquely, we can make that work.
So as a quick aside here, my sports columnist wants me to ask you something, and he'll kill me if I don't. He wants to know whether you're more worried about Jake Paul or Mike Tyson.
I have no idea how to call this fight. It's going to be incredibly entertaining, and that's what we try to do day in and day out. So that's all I know for sure.
So another departure for Netflix is in live experiences. So you've apparently launched Netflix House in King of Prussia. I mean, I was just amazed to find out there was a place in America called King of Prussia. But anyway, you've now got a Netflix house at this place, and also one in Dallas, I think.
Yeah, they're under construction now. They're not open yet.
Yeah, and are they an attempt to sort of take on Disney, or is this more of a kind of marketing ploy?
It's not an attempt to take on Disney. We're not building. It's not. I don't think it competes with Disneyland. Mostly, what it is a way. What we found is we've launched like 50 of these live experiences around the world, all over the world. Things like the Bridgerton Ball, where people come in full costume on their own and go to a 3-hour dance and are judged by the Queen, and it's very fun and it's very popular. We've had like 7 marriage proposals at Bridgerton balls around the world. We kind of started it with during COVID. We did a Stranger Things drive-through experience where we took over an empty parking lot during COVID and people drove through it. It was hugely popular. And we'd have the Squid Game challenge, Squid Game trials at the, that is but they pick up and travel. So you spend so much time and energy and money on the setting them up and breaking them down. This is a way to bring some scale to this thing that consumers really love, which is to put themselves into these storytelling worlds and share them on their social media and just have a really great experience out. This will be kind of the best of everything we've learned from our live experiences, including Netflix Bites, which was a restaurant experience we did in LA last year. So they'll all have a food component with all of our food brands. They'll have ticketed experiences. They'll have live, more immersive retail experiences. They're both like 100,000 square foot facilities, one in Dallas, one in King of Prussia, and meant to be mostly a learning experience of how we can make this travel. And I would love to see that. While I don't see us having a park, I do see that we could have 50 or 60 of these around the world, and people would visit them a lot more frequently than they visit the park.
So definitely part of a real growth area for you then.
Yeah, and I think at the core, it's not relative to the core business. I think it complements the core business because you look at it, even consumer products and across all the studios. It's part marketing, it's part business. It's much more important for me that it's big than it is that it's wildly profitable, because the big is a reflection of the cultural impact of the storytelling.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a bit about Netflix culture, because obviously, famously, Netflix has got this very distinct culture that's been credited with being able to attract talent and create this real kind of sort of environment of excellence. Now, but this year you've updated your culture memo.
Yeah.
And I think I'm right in thinking that you've ditched the freedom and responsibility section of the memo and talking more now about employing unusually responsible people.
Yeah.
And you've also got rid of the language saying you don't want to employ brilliant jerks. So does that mean that there's now room for brilliant jerks at Netflix?
So the reflection of the update of the document, a little history of that document. We started doing it years ago. The company was pretty small. We had I bet we didn't have 300 employees. We started writing the culture memo. It was interesting, back to that first meeting with Reed in 1989, Reed was talking about all those concepts that are in the original culture memo. And I thought, wow, we barely have people here. You're talking about a culture. But he was looking very long range, and what this business was going to be. And it was perfectly suited for a couple hundred employees. And when you had basically so few that you could go through it with them every, once a month, we'd actually go through it with new hires. That's what the document was for. And then Reed had, the big insight, which was, we should publish this thing. So instead of hiring people, then telling them what we believe, why don't we tell people what we believe and see if they want to work here? And so he just literally one day pushed a button and put the culture memo on the internet. And Sheryl Sandberg said it's the most important document in the history of the internet. So I do think it was one of those things where we didn't take lightly the evolution of the document, but it actually reflects much more today our 14,000 employee business culture. And the freedom and responsibility evolution we didn't throw it out. Yeah. We just, it was probably a little more emphasis on freedom than responsibility. And we think you have to have both. So it's ways of recrafting some of those things. But the core values in the new document are all in the old document.
Right. Yeah. Did you get any pushback from the update, or?
Well, what's interesting, because it's such an iconic thing, you get a little bit. And I do think one thing that we have to really help employees understand all the time is that we put no energy in preserving the culture. We are constantly working on improving the culture. And so when anyone says, hey, the culture is changing, yes, of course, it needs to. We definitely change the culture. We want it to reflect how we work, not dictate how we work.
And did you update the famous keeper test as well, or does that?
It's in there.
It's still in there. Yeah. It's still rigidly applied.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful. I mean, honestly, I feel like it's one of those things where it was a good insight, which is, this is, we're looking for the best and brightest, and we wanted a lot of people. Some people choose in and out of the culture too, and we don't just choose in and out of them. And it's not. It is often written about as being this kind of cold and cutthroat thing, and it's really not. Mm-hmm. It's just, are we constantly saying, are we happy with each other, and being able to be candid with each other and ask the hard question.
So another distinctive feature of Netflix culture is this co-CEO model. You are co-CEO, previously with Reed Hastings, now with Greg Peters. There's been a lot of talk this week about succession CEO at Disney. Yeah. Is the co-CEO model one that you would recommend to Disney?
It's hard for me to recommend the program to another company where I don't really understand their business their business culture. I understand their business pretty well, but not their business culture. It works really well for Netflix for all the reasons that culture document is so important, for the reasons that it exists, the reason that the evolution to co-CEO, that this goes back to, I'm going to go back to 1999 again. Reed told me he was going to create a company that was going to be around way after him. So succession was on his mind in 1999. And I think it was on his mind 10 years ago when he and I started more running the business together. And I think it was on his mind 5 years ago when we officially named me co-CEO. And I think in the evolution of Reed becoming our executive chair, we had the time to prove out the model that for this company, for Netflix, the co-CEO model works uniquely well. Mm-hmm. We've got two very distinctly different things that we have to accomplish. One is in the technology of the delivery and the UI and all the product enhancements that has to happen, and then this kind of creative culture that has to, pick and create the programming for the world. And the creative culture and the technical and the tech cultures are different. And we knew that coming in. We knew that early on. I never officed in Silicon Valley. When I joined Netflix, I was the first employee in Southern California. My office was in my bedroom in Palos Verdes, and I used to commute up to Los Gatos a couple of days a week, and eventually realizing that I really got to intimately know the tech culture as well, and how they could work together, and how they were not very complementary of each other in some other ways. So what I said, we need to build a company where our tech employees feel like they work at the greatest tech company in the world, and our creative employees need to feel like they work at the best entertainment company in the world, and they both have to be true. So we've always run the business that way. So CoCEO worked really well for us, where we could focus on core deliverables. Just like me and Reed, Greg and I have got incredible mutual respect for each other. We like each other. We like working with each other. We have skill sets that are complementary. And I feel like there's this goofy phrase, it's lonely at the top. There's something really unique about having someone that you can have as a sounding board that isn't your employee, that isn't a board member, to work on new things and new ideas. And so I find it to be a really incredible model for us. I don't know that it works everywhere. If your business culture is more politically charged than ours is, it might not go so well. There were 3 co-emperors in the Roman Empire. None of them went very well.
But I mean, would you take a call from James Gorman if he was to ring you about the Disney CEO job?
Not even on my mind. Not even on my mind.
Really? Right. Well, okay.
Honestly, I think what we're doing is so exciting, and again, it feels like at 10% of TV engagement, that feels so small, right? And I think so what's it feel like to get to 15, to get to 20? Can we do that? When we were at 2, 4% seemed impossible. So I feel like when I look at all these different milestones, but at our first 1 million subscribers, we had a party for 1 million subscribers. We got to 1 million subscribers. We're at 282 million subscribers around the world now. And I feel like the business has evolved. The people, we've gotten to the place where, we're doing, we're not just exporting Hollywood content around the world. So it's not like we're doing a better version of something else. We're doing something that's really never been done before. That's endlessly exciting.
But okay, so if not next CEO of Disney, you've been hugely successful. You've been at Netflix now for 28.
It'll be 25 years now.
25 years. Do you ever think about what you might do next? Is there some sort of public service role, or I don't know, run for office? What might the next chapter look like for Ted Sarandos?
I always say never say never. I'm never going to run for office. But I would say that I feel like I don't know, because I'm so energized every day about what we're doing. And I know that sounds crazy after 25 years, but every couple of years it feels like we're doing something completely different. I mean, from the evolution of mailing DVDs around the U.S. When I joined Netflix, my job was to go buy the DVDs at Best Buy and Walmart and Costco, wherever we can find them. Going from that to what we're doing today, I mean, it's remarkable that how can anyone get tired or bored? But we're looking at that evolution, and very few companies have been able to make those evolutions. So like people forget, it went from domestic only, DVD by mail, to we were actually even transactional at the beginning, so transactional to subscription, to digital, which we always thought was going to be the business. We named it Netflix, not DVD Flix, for a reason, and then to kind of getting into original production. All these things feel like incredible leaps, and I've done them every couple of years, and I just feel like it leaves the possibility of what is the next exciting jump going to look like and feel like. Pretty hard to predict right now. But but if it's anything like the last few, it's going to be amazing.
Good. Okay. Well, look, we haven't got much time, but I'll take a question from the audience. There's one over here.
You got a microphone coming.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. Anyone on the managerial side, the business side of your company that's joined in the last few years has only known Netflix as a market leader, and obviously that's not true for you, going to Best Buy. So I was wondering if you could reflect a little bit, please, on how it feels to be a market leader, the fruits of your labor in terms of being able to kind of throw your weight around to shape an industry for the benefit of consumers, and also just from an organizational evolution perspective, if you could talk a little bit about how your leadership team learned to thrive as an incumbent, thrive as a market leader. How much of that is like Netflix lifers learning those skills versus like alloying your leadership team with people who come from other leadership positions?
Look, I think there's something about humility that we try to instill in all of our leaders. Like I said, many of them, you're right, the ones that have just joined recently had not been around for Quickster or some of those other big trips in the business. But we've always looked at it. I remember early on having a conversation with the leadership team about my kids are 28 and 30. And when you're very young, I think you think about life is just like this. I get older and, smarter and richer and get married and have kids and do all these things. Like at a pretty linear, up and to the right. Life was always up and to the right. But then when you actually look back on it, it's a series of incredible highs and lows. And that we should treat the business that way too, which is we expect there to be incredible highs and lows in the business. That when you pull way back, it's going to look like this if you do it all right. But you're going to have lows in the business. You got to be ready for that. And you've got to be willing to make hard sacrifices for the long-term business. And if you're petrified of those dips, you'll never do those things. So that's the thing we try to kind of condition people to do. Fight for that thing that's going to get us there in the end and win in the end. And be ready for the fact that, failing is not the end of the world. You'll learn a bunch from it and move on. Don't make the same mistake 1,000 times, but go ahead and make 1,000 mistakes, and we'll be fine. And remember, I think when we hire people out of the entertainment industry is mostly a fear culture. Where people would, be fired for making a bad choice of a show or, however it went. And I really look at it and say, well, what did we learn from that show that didn't work or that movie that didn't work? And let's not do that again versus this other thing, which is like every decision is life or death. And if I don't do this right, I'm going to get fired. Someone's head's got to be on the block for this. So we intentionally did not go down that path. Probably a lot of influence from the tech side of the business, which is a lot of iteration. You know what I mean? So you can launch software and then keep iterating on it forever. You make a movie, once you've locked the cut, that's the movie. So those things are quite different, but we try to figure out how do you learn the best of both of those.
Okay, Ted, we're out of time, so I'm going to wrap up with 2 questions. Firstly, what's the one series that Netflix didn't make that you wish you had made?
Oh, you love that question.
I do. It's useful.
Honestly, there's a bunch of them. And there's a lot of them that I would think that for me that there's, there's no like monopoly on storytelling. Someone's going to have a good idea. Someone's going to see something that you didn't. And then a lot of times the pitch will come in and the show that ultimately comes out is nothing like the pitch that came in. So either sometimes the one that you greenlit or the one that you passed on. And so I look at things that, I wish we had every show that was successful somewhere else. And I think along those lines, for me personally, I love The Bear. I love watching The Bear. And I wish that was one of ours. I do think things like Ted Lasso was super important, super, impressive for Apple. People really loved it. It was a kind of a show that spoke to the time really well. They knew people were looking for something light and fun, and it was just that. And for me, it's because we do such a wide breadth of programming, and what I'm looking to do is make shows that are so good that when you're in the middle of the one you're watching, like I know you told me you're watching Nobody Wants This, she's got good episodes ahead, that somewhere around episode 6, you start thinking, I hope the next one is good.
Yeah.
Before this is over, I hope the next thing is going to be great, and we deliver on that so often that you come to expect us to make your favorite show over and over and over again. And that requires a lot, and I watch everything. So you asked that question. As a fan, I watch all of our competitor stuff. I watch all the movies that come out. I really consume a lot of content. So, but what I do know is that there's a little bit of kismet in all of them. Mm-hmm. Every once in a while, like that show, Nobody Wants This, was passed everywhere.
Really?
We were the last stop.
Wow.
It got pitched at Hulu, ABC, Freeform, Amazon, Apple, everywhere. And our team saw something in it.
Why did they, I mean, sorry, we'll go off and have another half-hour conversation, but why did they say no to it? Were they worried about the setup?
I think you see something in it that everyone else didn't. Right. For me, I think it was a little bit of Aaron and Sarah Foster. This was Aaron's creation. I kind of knew her story and knew her voice, and the fact that she captured her voice so perfectly in this pilot script was so impressive. But also, again, these shows not being exactly what they were when they came in. Because it came to Netflix, we got Kristen Bell. And Kristen Bell insisted on Adam Brody as soon as right on the way in. So the show became what it is because it was on Netflix. Yeah. It may not have been that show if it was somewhere else. So it's, again, part of that kismet, and a lot of it is like when I say we care about the customer, we think about the members every day. Will our members love this?
Right.
What are the chances? Not, am I impressed with this? Is that something for me? I watch a lot of things that I'm glad we didn't make that I love, because I don't think a lot of people would have watched them. But I do think, in general, and what I really look at is that focus on consumer joy will win every time. You have to figure out what the business model is to support it, but it will win every time.
Okay, very last question, one answer. What do I watch when I've finished? Nobody wants this.
I don't know what you're going to, again, get back to your mood. I don't know what kind of you're going to be in the mood for
I
yet.
think you...
You know what you'll love? We have a show coming up in a couple of weeks called Black Doves out of the UK with Keira Knightley. It's
I'm down.
phenomenal.